We've quickly become one of the world's leading robotics and AI companies. Our solutions leverage technology like computer vision, advanced sensing and compute, machine learning, and data analytics.
You ever get the feeling that everything in America is completely fucked up? You know that feeling that the whole country is like 1 inch away from saying, that's it, forget it. Let's see.
Hey, twist around. Now look, here's a house full of bees. You think the honey badger cares? It doesn't give a shit.
Listen, let's get one thing straight.
Price is right.
Guns don't kill people. I do.
Every Friday night there's a steady cloud of dust that leads back to a field filled with big gun trucks. I know I ain't cranking way up loud. Coolers in the back, tailgate stand. There's a big fire burning, but don't be alarmed. It's just country boys and girls getting down on the farm. It's been on the tractor, ain't seen Becky all week. Somebody said they seen them headed down to the creek. Farmer Johnson's daughters just pulled up in a Jeep.
So check out
and he knows how to grow them, if you know what I mean. Oh, Dave's getting loud, but he don't mean no harm. We're just country boys and girls getting down on the farm. You can have a lot of fun in a New York minute, but there's some things you can't.
All right, that was, any guesses, James, on who that was?
No.
Not really your genre.
No, I don't know country that well.
We have a special guest in the studio today, Dayna Ghirardelli from the Sonoma County Farm Bureau.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thank you.
Do you know that song?
I do, and because you asked him, I was like, oh, I know exactly who that is and why.
Tim McGraw.
Oh, my gosh, how ridiculous.
So, welcome.
Thank you.
We do a different song for the intro every week, and usually Matt's sitting there, and he'll, I try to stump him on who it was, because Matt's kind of like a savant when it comes to music. He's been in all sorts of famous bands that we're not allowed to
talk about.
Mention on the air, and he's just one of those people that like gets music, like his brain is just wired for it. So
yeah, that was the most mainstream song I think I've ever heard you play.
Yeah.
Oh,
well,
I get to think we were stumped, right?
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. So I mean, a little on the nose, a little heavy with the getting down on the farm. But since we're talking to Dayna from the Farm Bureau today, I thought maybe it was appropriate.
Totally appropriate.
You know, I've been listening to that song a lot, just preparing for this because just editing it and whatnot. And what struck me about it is because that song was popular when I was in high school, and that nostalgic feeling that you get from songs in general was kind of cool. But it made me kind of nostalgic for farming or living near farms like I used to up in Humboldt County, and just this kind of older way of doing things. And I don't know if that's accurate. I mean, I know farmers are very technologically advanced and everything these days, but the idea of going back to the farm, back to this simple way of life, appeals to me so much. And I think that a lot of people have that same kind of nostalgia, for this simpler life. And I don't know. Does that make sense to you guys? Is that kind of I have a feeling like when you look at farms today, they're not simple. And we were just talking before you got here about some of the $800,000 tractors that John Deere makes and are hooked up to AI now, and obviously GPS and whatnot. So I don't know. What do you think? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely not in the simple way of growing food and farming anymore. And a lot of that comes from the pressures and expectations around regulations. And, some are very necessary. Some are a little probably over onerous. But, farmers are in the business to be efficient and to be innovative.
Right.
So our farms have changed because they've evolved and had to change with the times.
Yeah. What drives that, you think?
I think growth and population. drives that. I think, expectation among our consumers will drive that. Again, regulatory expectations drives, how we do business. So I think it's a combination of things. And as our population grows, the more food we need with the same resources we've always had, or less,
Or
because
fewer,
because farms are going out of business.
Right.
So, but our population doesn't stop growing.
Yeah.
So efficiency and innovation is critical in maintaining a business.
You had mentioned right before we started recording that we were talking about FFA and 4-H and kids getting into farming. And you had mentioned that even kids that aren't really from a rural place or a background in agriculture
Absolutely.
are also starting to get into it. So that seems like as farming is, farms are becoming fewer and therefore having to produce more. I guess you could say like the population of actual farmers is shrinking, but you're seeing kids actually being interested in it who aren't from that
We are.
tradition. And is that new, or is that?
I'd say it. I would call it new. I honestly would call it new. There's just it seems like there's just a lot of kids who learn about the 4-H and FFA programs from their friends, that they want to get involved. And I think that just over time, people have found a way to connect the kids to farms to be able to take on projects such as raising animals that they otherwise wouldn't have the ability to do so. And so I had mentioned that there are a lot of farms here, ranches here that will connect with some of these students and allow them to keep their animals there, come out to the farm and help. But there's also schools, and I'll just name them. Santa Rosa High School has their own farm. So a lot of these kids who may want to raise a lamb or a hog or a steer have the ability to do that and keep them at the school farm. And then they have to put their time in and working at the farm. And I mean, it's a wonderful program, and it's a way to keep people connected to their food supply, right? And also teach these students this is what it takes to grow food, and that there's a business aspect, and then there's a food production aspect, right? That we're serving our consumers and our people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so cool. So many people, I feel like, don't really understand even the very basics on where food comes from.
Yeah, where does your food come from? The grocery store.
Right.
No,
I mean, sadly, that's a common answer. That is exactly where they believe their food's.
I know, and the same kids think that electricity comes from the plug.
Right.
Plug in the wall.
Right.
I hesitate to think that that's not intentional, in some degree, to try to disconnect people, isolate people. We talk a lot on this podcast about how there's kind of an attack on self-sufficiency in every walk of life. That is something that I guess is frowned upon by the elites, in air quotes, who make up a lot of the rules that we have to live under. And that any sort of self-sufficiency tends to be kind of curtailed or frowned upon. One time, my wife, we were in Arizona, and her stepbrother we were in the kitchen. I think they'd gone to the farmer's market or something, and they brought home some like onions or carrots or something, and they pulled them out of the bag, and he goes, "Ew, that looks like you just pulled it up out of the ground."
Yeah.
You're like, yeah.
Where the hell did you think it came from? It's like, gross. I'm not eating that.
Oh no.
Well, that's cool. Yeah, I would love to get my son involved in it. And I mean, I think we probably could find land, but that's cool that there is land available for kids to get them into that, even if they live in an apartment or something.
I think there's opportunities out there. And it's about making the right connections. The more our population grows and the more farmers become fewer, I think a lot of them are recognizing we have to engage in some form or fashion. So if they have the ability to help a student or whatnot, I think, it's nobody should ever feel as though they can't have the opportunity. It's always worth exploring. It may or may not work out every time, but it's always worth exploring.
Isn't the average age of a rancher across America something like 74 years old? Like really high, right?
It's very high. Yeah. And it keeps growing. And I just talked with somebody else about this. What are the challenges about keeping and farming? And a lot of it is succession. It's hard to farm. A lot of the kids coming up now are looking at their parents and saying, I'm watching my parents work so hard and then trying to pay the bills every month, and they're working, overtime. I don't I don't know if I want this life for me. You also have parents saying, go do something before you come back here. Go do something for two reasons. One, if you find something else you didn't know you loved and you want to do it, you should do it. The other is go out, live in the world, and then come back here to recognize there's life beyond here. And when you come back here, I'm your dad or your mom, but now I'm also your boss, or I might be your partner. And we, just kind of get a little bit more worldly experience, with quotes, worldly. So the succession element is a staggering, statistic when you watch a lot of these kids move on off the farm.
One of the ranchers I deal with, I think he's 50 or 51 now, and this is in Sonoma County, and he is the young guy,
right,
amongst all his peers.
Sure.
I mean, so is that trend of average age being older consistent in Sonoma County as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's interesting that you said that farmers are realizing that they may have to do like some outreach.
Right.
Because every farmer that I know is so humble and so, not interested in promoting what they do
right.
to anyone. So that's got to be
There's
kind
a
of
strong leave me alone element.
Yeah. They just want to do their
Let me
thing,
do
be
my
left
work.
alone.
I'm going to work 18 hours right now.
And it's such a hard job. It is fraught with all sorts of danger because of how much money farmers, and maybe you can elaborate on this, but how much money they have to borrow in order to actually succeed in their business. And then on top of that, if they have kids and a family, they have all those responsibilities. And then, to ask them also to do outreach and try to promote farming to the youth. I mean, that's just a heavy lift.
You're 100% right. And back to your point also was, people just want to work. I'm on my ranch. I'm working hard. I'm working 15 hours a day. I don't want to do that. And that's not what I do.
Right.
That's still, I think, a very common tone, but I think the realization of we have to open ourselves up a little more and connect somehow is becoming more real. So I don't want to make it sound like all the farmers are like, we need to open our doors, because it's also scary. So I know we're going to talk about Measure J, and that alone makes it scary. You don't want to open your doors because you already have people that don't believe in what you do.
Right.
And so you want to connect with consumers. And we even tell the kids at the fair when they have their animals, 9 times out of 10, the people coming to the fair really want to learn about your project.
Right.
They really want to learn about, how did you get it? What are you doing with it? And tell us about what you learned. People want to learn. It takes one person to come in with an ulterior motive and mess it all up.
Totally.
Right? And so it's just kind of that fine line. And the farmers don't have the time to get out and to open themselves up unless they create that part of their business model. But again, therein lies another expense, because the job that they might have to, the work that they might have to step away from to host a tour, that work doesn't go away. So do you get to a point now, I need to hire somebody to come in and give tours. I need to hire we're constantly having to hire people to fill the needs to be able to meet the consumer. So there's a lot of kind of momentum, I think, building around it, what that looks like. It'll be interesting to see how it lays out. But like for the Farm Bureau, we're trying to create programs or different opportunities to get people to connect with the consumer. Obviously, you have different brands, Clover, Strauss, that they're trying to get, Petaluma Poultry, they're trying to get out, connect with consumer. But all of that is a different level and element. So it's trying to find kind of that special sauce where we can allow farmers to be farmers and farmers to farm, and still connect the consumer and their community and their neighbors to food production.
It's also not, blatantly obvious what the return on that investment is. Maybe by doing the outreach and getting people to know that the Petaluma egg producer that you're talking about, if they know them, they'll be less likely to support some measure like Measure J that comes up, or something that happened maybe to like the Mulas dairy, where they got forced out of business. But if the community is connected to those farms, then there's a lot bigger chance that they're just going to step in and say, no, absolutely not.
Right. And I believe that's happening right now. So I don't mean to jump ahead, but I do believe that's happening here in Sonoma County. I think our Sonoma County residents recognize our farmers and ranchers here.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
When we did an episode a while back, and I talked about the Mulas dairy, which I do.
It's devastating.
Let's talk about it a little bit. But the response that I got from that, I mean, I had people saying to me, they'll remain nameless, we need to go find the attorneys that were available to this and beat them within an inch of their life and just leave them, naked in a field somewhere. I mean, it was a visceral, angry response from people on that, because basically, if you didn't hear that episode, you don't know what happened. This dairy in Sonoma County that is 101 years old, they got sued by the California Sport Fishing Protection Alliance, which, if you couldn't make up a dumber,
never heard of them,
name. Like basically they're protecting sport fishing, right? Allegedly. Right. They sued them because the cows were pooping. Hope you're sitting down for this, on the ground. Right. And that is, despite millions of years of that being the case, they found some loopholes. This dairy was not even in violation of federal law, but just through really like underhanded tactics, flying drones over. They got pictures of like a little bit of, maybe a cow pooping in a puddle, which is, very, very bad, as you can imagine how awful that is for the environment. And just sued them over and over again and just threw so much lawfare at them that they had to close. And it wasn't even that, high of a dollar amount, in my opinion. A millionaire, which we have a lot of in Sonoma County, could easily stepped in and just said, no, like get out of here with that, that ridiculous lawsuit. But being the humble farmers that they were, that just, no one really knew about it. And it just kind of came and went, and they had to shut down their dairy. And now, so we've gone from, at the peak, you probably know better than I do, but correct me if I'm wrong on these numbers, but about 300 dairies in Sonoma County down to about 50.
I mean, 300 dairies probably back in the late 70s, and we're at 50 today.
Wow. Yeah. Just.
So to backtrack on, and just because I want to cover it with you since we have you here, I buy grain. I buy barley. And 10 years ago when I started going out, reaching out to growers to grow it for me, they wanted nothing to do with me. Like and then the wheat commission, I got involved with the wheat commission up in Davis, and they said, well, we're having this event. We're going to have all these guys in the same room. Come on up. And I said, okay. And then we all sat in a kind of U-shaped room or U-shaped table, and there's probably 20 grain growers there. And she didn't tell me this, but she said, okay, I got all these guys in the room for you. Go ahead and give a presentation. And I was like, what? And I had 20 of the hardest looking guys with one eyebrow up staring at me. Like, who's this son of a bitch?
Just very distrustful of you?
Just unbelievably. It took me over a year to find someone to grow barley for me.
Wow.
So what I'm getting at with that, and I understand, now that I've been in this for 10 years, like I understand where they're coming from. So I have nothing against them, but there's got to be, I was there with good money saying, I need this to happen. And to your point a little earlier, these guys don't think in day terms, week terms, month terms. These guys are thinking year out, 5 years out, 10 years out. And if I'm going to change this and do this, like this is a 5-year process.
Yeah. They're not just going to take some chance.
Some Yahoo, with a buying barley coming in, like, and I get
mustache.
it, but it does, with a beautiful mustache.
Sorry, that's what I meant.
There has to be something that, and I'm sure that's kind of where you're at, something that bridges that gap for guys that are starting businesses like me, agricultural based businesses, to be able to reach out to these guys and to not take a year. I mean, it took a long time for me to get somebody. And it wasn't until we teamed up with UC Davis that we had some credibility.
Sure.
And they were willing to plant the test plots and stuff like that for us. But it took a long time. So is there something in place that connects people looking to pay these guys for what they do? That isn't so intimidating for a guy coming in like me.
Yeah, you said a key word you put in there is credibility, right? Because to that point, the risk and the investment and everything that they've put in, you're not just going to do a trial based on that good-looking mustache you got, right? So connecting yourself with UC Davis is great, but there's other programs that are. And I'm not even going to say programs, but there's different organizations that can help maybe make connections. I mean, on a whim, sometimes we have the ability to connect certain people through the Farm Bureau, but like Sonoma County Ag and Open Space is putting a program together where they're trying to create the ability for, this is not quite where you're at, but like for farmers to get into farming here in Sonoma County. With that comes other outreach to buyers and other markets. And I think it just becomes kind of a community of communication and connection, because again, it really comes back to credibility. I mean, I've seen a lot of people come in for different things. You know, when we were working with, let's just say, some manure management systems back in the 90s, and we had some people coming in and they all were going to save the world, right? At the end of the day, it was snake oil, and it was figured out over time. But there was a couple people that rose to the top because they were connected with UC Davis or somebody that already did the trial or somebody that somebody knew.
Right.
So, you know, it almost seems like, oh, are they kind of a guarded group of people and you can't tap in and get through that door? To a certain degree, I would say that yes, but only from a good business point of view.
Right.
But I think that there are organizations out there that can help make connections. But I'd have to look into it because I feel like there's a couple organizations that might actually be available for specifically that. They may not just be Sonoma County, but I feel like that, you know, the opportunities are there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. You can't fault farmers for being so guarded.
No, by the way,
everything.
You'll appreciate this. We train jiu-jitsu at
cool.
a gym here that has a reputation for being pretty intimidating, and it is intimidating when you first walk in. Nicest guys in the world, but you know, everybody's beating the crap out of each other, and it's a little. Those farmers were way tougher than anything in that gym. I was way more nervous in front of those guys than anything in a gym. Hard guys, man.
It's the cards are so stacked against farming, and I think our viewpoint on this podcast is that there is basically a war going on right now against farming around the world.
Family farming or small business farming.
Well, I think that there's what I think is happening is that small farmers and family-based farms are too independent, and what the powers that be would rather have is a few. It's ironic, a few factory farms located around the world that supplied the food for everyone, and how they're going to do that is, you know, anyone's guess, but. They are, you know, it's not a coincidence that at the same time they're introducing concepts like factory-grown meat.
Lab-grown meat.
Lab-grown meat, or bug farms,
right.
Where they're making hamburgers out of cockroaches. And that is actually what's going on. And so you don't notice it when you're just sitting in your kitchen reading the newspaper or watching the news that, for example, like there's a new law being passed that is... going to try to control farmers' access to water. It's like, well, that kind of makes sense. I mean, we do live in the West and it's arid here. And so we want to protect the groundwater. And so it's a death by 1,000 cuts. These little things keep happening that affect small farmers way more than they affect a factory farm, because the factory farms have first of all, they have politicians in their pockets. So they're able to handle small legislation. At the same time, they have access to very, large resources. And so they don't care about this kind of stuff. And in fact, it helps them because it puts the little guy out of business and allows them to reign supreme. And for example, so this clip that I just pulled up is that James sent me this actually earlier. New Sonoma County Groundwater Agency set to decide user fees for well water. And it's just like every law that ever gets passed. You start out with basic freedoms. Go back to 1776, right? We have basic freedoms that everyone is granted. Well, then they start passing laws. Every single time a law gets passed, what that's actually doing is putting guardrails on your freedoms. And now there's a new agency that we all of a sudden need to control groundwater. What that's saying is that you used to have the freedom to access your well and your groundwater. Now we're going to curtail that and actually start, enforcing how much groundwater you can actually use. So read less than you could before, right? That's what it's going to come down to. And then during a drought, it's going to be even less. I mean, it's similar to what happened in the Central Valley when you drive down I-5 and you see all those signs about their water being shut off and all the dead orchards.
Yeah.
It's just a move to try to put a crimp on the ability for farmers to farm.
Let me give a little background on this before you answer. This is a couple of years old. I don't know where it's progressed. Maybe you could update us. But you have guys that are 5, 6, 7 generations on their ranches that have been using well water for all that time. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, this agency pops up and says, well, we're going to put a meter on your well, essentially charging you or limiting you for how much water you use. And, these guys have been operating within their business model for hundreds of years now. And all of a sudden they're going to be charged for water. And it's like, well, like you said, death by a thousand cuts, and it just keeps going. So can you update us on where this is and what's going on with it?
The county has helped to subsidize these fees in the last several years since this started. For the reasons I think that you bring up is the fact that this has been kind of a by right, water availability source. But it's going to start getting to the point where, yes, they're going to start charging for how much water. They're going to want you to start monitoring how much water you use, send that information in. It's trying to find this is the kind of stuff that we like at Farm Bureau, and our board members like to be at the table for, is to kind of have these conversations and understand, because we have to be part of this of a solution if there is a problem. Right. So we want to make sure we're there to protect our interests as well as make sure that we're helping along with the solution. So where this is going to fall out, there's a whole myriad of people and interests that sit at that table. So we'll see where it falls out. At this point, I don't have more to offer. But those groundwater sustainability agencies are in place and taking data, sampling for water, availability in the different areas and looking to see where the higher risk areas are. And I think where the higher risk areas are, those are going to be the ones that probably feel the pain with, fees and whatnot. And, our question is, okay, well, the water is the water and you're going to charge us a fee. Where's that for what? Where's that money going?
Buy more water and dump it into the aquifer.
So, I mean,
these agencies don't pay themselves. Someone thinks.
Well, that's what I was going to say, and I don't want to, put words in your mouth. I imagine that you have to be pretty diplomatic with this kind of stuff, but. My personal Liberty Tree view is that once that agency is in place, that's it. It's too late, because then it's just a matter of ratcheting down on the farmers. That putting that agency.
I would say rural, not even just farmers, but rural
people,
owners.
Yes,
anybody
absolutely.
That has a well.
Absolutely. Right. So it used to be, California is not new to droughts. Drought is a factor going back millennia.
I think they made a movie about it, Chinatown.
Right. Very good.
Yeah.
And
Deep pool.
So them putting in this agency is not necessary. We've dealt with it before. Now this agency has to be there, and you have to, at the point of a gun, follow what they put in place, even though we've never had to deal with it before, and they can't exactly explain why all of a sudden this is necessary. Now that it's in place, sure, the county is subsidizing it, and they're not going to, we're just taking data right now, but eventually that's going to be used, and it's going to just ratchet down on farmers. And Measure J is similar to this. And I guess we'll explain what Measure J is for those who don't know, but it's basically it's a bill that has to do with CAFOs or CAFOs. I don't know how you pronounce it, but concentrated animal feeding operations, which to the layperson is basically a factory farm. And this is the Coalinga, feedlot that you see on the side of Highway 5 when you're driving down south. These classifications it's similar to the water rights thing in that the EPA or whoever it is right now, I think most people just go with the EPA definition of what is a CAFO. This is an arbitrary definition that's been made up by bureaucrats in order to control farms, and all they have to do to further control farms is just change the definition. With the swipe of a pen, all of a sudden what a CAFO becomes more and more strict. And so we have a voting guide at Liberty Tree that we put out every year, and you open it up and it just says no on it. Because once these laws are put in place, they never get repealed, and then they just get manipulated to be more and more strict, and they infringe on our rights more and more. So, we're pretty hardcore libertarian when it comes to that kind of stuff. But I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but I would like to get into Measure J.
Sure.
With you.
Yep.
Do you want to say something about Measure J before?
Background on J?
Sure. So this is a measure that was brought to Sonoma County by a group that's actually based in Berkeley. And there were a couple of local Sonoma County residents who basically signed off to as a resident to be able to put it through the county. But this is really being driven by a group out of Berkeley who's been basically terrorizing our county, especially our poultry producers, for the last several years.
I believe the lawyers that sued the Mullah's Dairy out of existence were from Berkeley also.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm not totally positive about that. But nonetheless, it was brought here by this group. And their ultimate goal, if you look at all of their collateral, in their websites and whatnot, the ultimate goal is really to end animal agriculture. Right. So they don't believe in the use of animals for anything other than to be equal to humans.
Right.
So this is something of a stepping stone of trying to get to that goal. And so kind of back to what you were talking about, the CAFO, concentrated animal feeding operation. So that is, they're taking a definition by the US EPA that is actually in place just to be able to gauge what kind of water quality regulations may need to be imposed on a farm of a various size. Doesn't mean that once that size is hit, they have to do all of these things. It's just kind of a guide that says, based on this farm and this size, we're going to look to see if they need to do have certain expectations from a regulatory point of view. It doesn't say farms can't operate at that size. It doesn't. It gives them every opportunity to make sure that their facility is in compliance and doing well with, water quality, the goal of water quality. And I will say this, right? We talk about water quality like it's an us versus them. Mm-hmm. We as farmers, we drink that water. Yeah. We play in that water. Like, why would we want to harm that water?
You probably think about water quality more than the average person.
Absolutely, without question.
Yes.
So with this measure, they are saying that they're going to take the US EPA definition, as I just described it to you, and impose it as a Sonoma County ordinance. But what it does is it just takes the number threshold for each species and says, we can't have farms this size.
Right.
So it doesn't matter. There's no merit to it. It doesn't matter how proficient of a farm you are. It doesn't matter if you are an organic farm, because there are several. It doesn't matter if you have a ton of acres that goes with that size.
Right. Just the number.
That's just the number. And so the other thing that you had mentioned, and I think it's really, really important for people to understand, is you had said that, to the layperson, a CAFO is a factory farm. Those two things don't coincide. They are not synonymous with each other. And to be honest with you, a factory farm, there is no quantifiable definition of a factory farm. It's really subjective.
Right.
I personally don't like the term factory farm. Mm-hmm. Because there are some really phenomenal farms that are of large scale that are tremendously successful with wonderful environmental innovations there, while their animals are so well taken care of. Yeah. So to put a number on that is just asinine.
I think that the term concentrated animal feeding operation, though, is intentionally designed to make you think factory farm, because they're not saying a large, beautiful, grassy farm with a lot of animals on
Idyllic.
it. They're making those terms make your brain think of a concrete floor, just nasty place. And it's no surprise that if you look at the Yes on Measure J propaganda, it's all pictures of the worst possible conditions that you could think of. Are you familiar with the Yanasa TV channel on YouTube? It's this guy named Charlie and his wife. They do a podcast called As a Man Thinketh, and you should check it out. They live in North Carolina, but they do stories all over the country about farming. Mm-hmm. And one of the stories that caught my attention was in Oregon. They tried to pass a law very recently in Oregon to redefine a CAFO as any animal operation, regardless of the number. Mm-hmm. So if you had one chicken and you had a concrete floor under that chicken, or a gravel floor, or any sort of paving underneath that one chicken, then you would be classified as a CAFO, and then you would have to follow all of the same water control measures and everything that these giant farms would have to follow. Luckily, it didn't pass, but that's kind of my point about you get this stuff into place and we're only talking about farms with 800 cows.
What's the big deal?
Next year it's one cow.
So that really is the key to this particular measure as well, is if I can just back up a minute. So I come from the dairy industry, so it's easier for me to talk in dairy terms than any other term. So if you can embellish me on this one.
That's pretty much what I know about farming too, so that's great.
So for a CAFO, to be a large CAFO, it's 700 cows. 700 cows.
Okay. No matter how big the
No matter
land
how many,
is or anything.
it doesn't matter. 700 cows. And I can tell you, there are farms here and some dairies here in Sonoma County that are over 700 cows. That's also met with the same amount or more acres. And most of them are organic. And those that aren't organic have other, third-party certifications for animal welfare, as the organic folks do. The organic folks, have other.
Is that voluntary or something that they do in order to get a certificate,
So a lot of times it's the processor, the buyer you're working with will impose kind of like, these are the programs we want to be able to sell the milk under.
I see.
So we want to do, an animal welfare program. So just as an example, Clover Sonoma, back in the 90s, got together with American Humane Association, and that was the first dairy in the United States that created expectations or the whole layout of like what it takes for you to be certified by American Humane.
That's amazing.
Set the bar.
I love so that's like a great example of just the free market solution. They're voluntarily doing this out of their own pocket in order to put a label on there or a brand out there that says that we care about these animals. No government rules needed. They're just doing it out of the desire to be those people.
Absolutely.
Hopefully sell more milk.
And hopefully ensure to the consumer, we follow these standards, so feel good about the milk you're buying, right? And so all of the farms here in Sonoma County follow something of that nature.
Well, that gets to the question is Sonoma County has a reputation. I opened my business in Sonoma County because of this reputation of being very, very observant or very vigilant about taking care of the land and taking care of the animals.
Without question.
So why would Jay come here with this nonsense?
I'll tell you
we already have this reputation. Why would there's plenty of other counties where they don't have this reputation.
Well,
let me. Do you mind? I'm sorry to interrupt you.
I would love to hear what you're.
I want to answer that.
Yeah, Farm Bureau, Kelly. Let's hear it. I don't mean to interrupt.
I heard it from secondarily, but from the horse's mouth of why they came to Sonoma County. So, as you know, at the fair there was the No on Jay booth, and then right next to it was the Yes on Jay.
Around the corner, yes.
Around the corner, yeah. And so, my wife was telling me that her friend Vicky was over there talking to the No on Jay people. And one of the Yes on Jay people comes wandering over to interject into the conversation, which is just like rude and
obnoxious,
and not surprising now that the more I know about these people. And so she kind of engaged him, and he was trying to, downplay what she was hearing. And she said, why are you guys even here in Sonoma County? And he just flat out said, he said, well, this is a very liberal county, so we thought we'd be able to succeed here.
Yep.
Had nothing to do with the conditions in Sonoma County.
Insane.
It was just the political possibility of passing this, which is the first of its kind in California, in the country. So I'm sorry, was that what you were going to say?
That was it. Yeah. Right. And it really is if we can pass this here, this is a great stepping stone for us to take this other places. If we can show that we can pass this in Sonoma County, we can go everywhere with this. So absolutely.
They'll just knock counties out.
Absolutely.
They'll just knock them out down the line. Sure. Now, so it sounds like the solution is to educate the people that they're targeting, I guess, that you're being misled by this Yes on Jay stuff.
Absolutely.
Is there anything in place to educate people that might not know and just think they're being good people? And I don't really fault people because people, they don't have all the information. They're trying to be good people. This is not like, oh, you're a bad person. It's just you're being misled and you're trying to be a good person. And let's face it, everybody doesn't have 10 hours a day to be looking up all the measures and figuring out what's going on. So is there something in place?
The problem is that most people think that as long as my emotions say that I feel warm and fuzzy, then I'm being a good person.
Yes.
And that's the easiest thing to hijack.
So along those lines, one of the main things that they will say, or at least when they were trying to get signatures, was, do you care about animals?
Yeah.
You should sign this petition because this is going to help us protect
no.
animals.
I'd have been like, nope.
I don't know any farmer, rancher, or dairyman who would say, yeah, nope, I don't care about animals. Nope, not me.
What kind of psycho would say no to that? Yeah.
Well, and they position themselves in front of Olivers, from
Right.
what I understand, which is,
Of course. Yeah.
And
Low-hanging fruit.
And but the messages they were giving them, the short little snippets of messages, these people are signing based on those messages because, to your point, emotionally, yeah, I'm a good person. Of course I care about these things. While they walk out with their 12, their dozen eggs and their Clover milk or Strauss milk, and they're like, yeah, I'm all for this because a lot of their messaging was, we're going to end factory farming. Well, nobody talked about Sonoma County.
Yeah.
We're going to make sure we take care of animals and make sure there's no animal abuse. And, just like all these crazy little snippets where, of course, why wouldn't you? Oh yeah, I want to protect that. We had so many people through that process and after say, oh my gosh, now that I know what this is, I'm really sorry. I signed that. How do I retract, my name from that? And it, it was kind of a long process, and then the process ended. And so now people say, what can I do? And all we can say is, well, now you just got to vote no,
Vote no.
Yeah.
right? Learn about it and vote no, and tell your friends, vote no, because this is not what they portrayed it to be. And all of the rhetoric and all of the propaganda that they throw out there is just, it's maddening. It's just maddening.
So is there do you have something?
Oh, sorry. I totally.
Do you have something in place? No. Do you have something in place to help educate these people? It's
Sure.
getting out there for sure.
Yep.
So whatever you're doing is working, because I'm
Good.
seeing people.
Well, she's
Starting to
coming on
reach
the
out to-
Liberty podcast. with
Right. Yeah.
Millions of people are going to hear this.
Yes.
So.
Millions.
Exactly.
People.
I mean, so there's going to be a few additional activations that will take place. Obviously, the low-hanging fruit is we have our website, noonmeasurej.com, for people to go and kind of learn about the implications and what it is and why you should vote no. There's been other groups that have formed, and one I wanted to kind of call out is called Community for Foods and Family Farms. And they've kind of created a coalition of farmers and restaurateurs, and they're trying to put together different events around the county to be able to connect farmers with consumers. And I think that's a great movement. We recently held something we called Sonoma County Farm Fest, and it was the first one we'd ever done. We did it out at the Tresh's Olympia's Valley Estate in Two Rock. And we had to limit it because we weren't sure how many people and whatever. It was so successful. The energy was great. I've since come across people that said, can I get a sign for my yard? Because I went to Farm Fest and I learned so much. So we're recognizing, again, it kind of goes back to like, through this process, we're recognizing the need to kind of open ourselves up, make sure we're connecting. So there's those things in short order. There's a lot of information out there, like even our Farm Bureau Facebook page or our Farm Bureau website will have information on different issues here in the county. Go to Strauss Family Creamery, go to Clover's Sonoma, go to Petaluma Egg Farm, go all of our local folks. It'll give you more insight on, the farming that's done here. There's also another website that's really important, which is called, I think it's Sonoma Food No on J. And that's actually a coalition group of several environmental organizations and kind of the specialty farmers and a couple different organizations that are basically coming out and saying, this is why this is bad for Sonoma County, because this is actually how we operate here in Sonoma County, and this is why it's bad. Right. So there's not enough time in a day to do the exact kind of outreach that we would love to do, but it's all these little pieces that everybody's doing and pushing out that is effective.
So
I'm going to link, or I'll connect
I'll
with
make
you
sure
and get a bunch of those links.
Absolutely.
I'll put them in the show notes.
two things come to mind with your answer. I found out about Jay on Instagram. A rancher was, bitching and complaining about it on Instagram.
Yep.
And I don't know how that got in my feed, but it did.
Right.
So I'd imagine for, it's like getting in bed with the devil or whatever, being on
Social media,
because
100%. It's
I
today's.
would imagine it's like 22 and 23-year-olds that are
Absolutely.
signing these things, right? Yeah. They're going to be on
Yes.
TikTok. They're going to be on Instagram.
Yes.
So I'm politely and respectfully saying maybe it'd be a good idea.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we are
some kind of social media presence like that. And that getting in those algorithms is no joke.
Huge.
Like that's a full-time job,
Right.
and maybe you got to pay influencers, or maybe I don't know how it works, but it seems like that, respectfully, that might be a good idea.
Absolutely.
And number two, the thing that comes to mind is like, well, pay kids to get out at Sonoma State and put up a booth and start telling people about this stuff. But that takes money.
Or volunteers.
Or volunteers, yeah.
So my question, but I don't think the Yes on J people are volunteers. I think they're being paid, which is my next question is, do we know who's paying the Yes on J people to promote this the way that they've been promoting it?
So from an official campaign point of view, there has to be certain filing deadlines. And so we know that up in through June thus far, they had like 35 people that have given to this campaign. 5 of them were from Sonoma County. They haven't really brought in a ton of money, but I'm going to go as far as to say that I believe they're not filing accurately. I also believe that there's other monies out there being spent in different ways. It's not necessarily being recognized. And I think it's very fair to say that all of these animal rights groups are all intertwined, right? So I think we should expect that the pockets are deep, they're far-reaching. So to come out and say specifically who's behind it, yes, you have this group out of Berkeley, and they call themselves a grassroots group, but Hollywood will back them.
I was just going to say, there's
Humane
huge
Society will back. If you think of every
George Soros is probably connected in some way. I'm serious.
I mean, in some maybe not directly, but somehow they are all somehow connected.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, hold on. We're going to take a small break.
Sorry.
Пока на месте ничто не держит и не наскучил мир этот мне, пока ночами пускай все режет, но я летаю еще во сне. И солнце всходило, и радуга цвела. Все было, и любовь была. Бывали закаты, и ливень бил в стекло. Все было когда-то, было да прошло. Еще как птица хочу подняться в крутое небо. Я иногда и сердцу снятся, как в детстве снятся другие страны и города. И солнце всходило, и радуга цвела. Все было, и любовь была. Бывали закаты, и ливень бил в стекло. Все было когда-то, было да прошло.
Okay, sorry about that. We're back though, everybody. Do you know this lady?
I know who that is, yes.
Okay. So this is the Yes on J commercial. What I'd like to do, we're going to play a little game. All right, I'm going to play it. Tell me to stop it as many times as you want, because I want to hear you kind of address everything that they say in this commercial.
Okay.
All right?
I'm voting yes on J. Stop factory
Go ahead.
farms in Sonoma County. Measure J will protect animals, our environment, small farms, and public health.
Stop.
Okay. Measure J will protect animals, our environment, what'd you say? And public health. Small farms and public health.
Okay, Measure J does none of those.
Okay.
It doesn't address any of those. Like I said earlier, it simply says a farm can't be bigger than a certain size.
Okay, so that's a blatant lie right there. Not even 10 seconds in.
Well, I'm sure she'll explain herself.
And I want you to make an informed decision about this important vote too. Measure J uses the definition from the Environmental Protection Agency for concentrated animal feeding operations, also known as CAFOs. CAFOs are large livestock and poultry operations that confine animals and produce.
For those of you who can't see this, now here come the worst images you've ever seen of animals.
Large amounts of animal waste. These facilities are defined and regulated by the EPA because the amount of waste they produce.
If they are defined and regulated by the EPA, then the EPA is doing their job.
Right.
And we don't have anybody out of compliance in Sonoma County. So therefore, food is being produced in a sustainable and compliant manner.
Great point.
Now we need more. We need another.
do you mean?
We need another layer of regulation on top of.
right.
I'm being sarcastic.
Yeah.
But, so what they're saying is that even though they're not saying it, they're scaring you.
Absolutely. It's baiting
Right.
and switching.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And what they're proposing is even more regulation, first of its kind in the nation, on top of what the EPA is already kind of regulating.
And the EPA is regulating management styles and practices to ensure that there's the protection of water quality and the environment.
And animals.
And no animals.
No, not animals.
US EPA has nothing to do with
EPS,
animals.
Oh, okay.
Nothing.
I was trying to draw that back to what she was saying. That
Yeah,
it,
no.
but- okay.
So again, it's taking a governmental definition and imposing it in a way that completely changes what it's doing and what it's for. And so it's a lot of bait and switch. It's a lot of, mixing it all together for the emotional component.
Right.
And then I wanted to go back to when you said, here comes the pictures, these horrible pictures.
Right.
So a couple things. Right now we're looking at a barn with some ducks in it. So this is all cage free. I'm
Right.
not a poultry expert by any means.
Right.
But they're putting they're taking pictures, and there's a lot of ducks here in front of us. In my estimation, not being an expert, they all look pretty healthy. They look
Yep.
pretty good.
This is not a bad picture.
It's not a bad picture, but also if one were to think it was, what's happening behind them? We don't know. There could be a whole other side of a barn where it's empty.
Yeah, it looks like a door.
Because, my point being is that they're trespassing into these farms. They're going into the middle of the night. These chickens, these ducks, they're getting freaked out. So they all run together in a corner.
Yeah, there's this.
And we're going to take a picture, and then we're going to tell everybody this is how they live.
Right. Because at
But
nighttime.
nobody's turning around to see what's behind them
That
because
is
there's
a great-
probably an empty barn sitting behind them. And
Yeah.
Great point.
Or you open up the door and it's nighttime out there, and you can't just let 1,000 ducks roam around in a field overnight.
I mean,
They'll get taken out.
exactly. We have predators. We have other reasons why these particular animals are managed in barns or in areas.
Excellent observation. I'm so glad we're doing
Really
this.
really good point.
Ready?
I guess.
Produce is a risk to the surrounding environment. Let's go through how the EPA defines a CAFO.
Stop.
First, we have to define.
Do we know that those pictures are from Sonoma County?
We don't know to be certain.
So they could throw up any pictures. I've never seen a lot like that in Sonoma County. And I've been to a lot of ranches.
Have you flown your drone illegally over
No, I haven't done
farms?
that. I haven't done that.
Step up your game.
I mean, just
An animal feeding operation, or an AFO. A facility must first meet the basic definition of an animal feeding operation before it can be designated a concentrated animal feeding operation. The EPA defines an AFO as a lot or facility where animals are confined for 45 days or more in an area where no significant vegetation can grow.
Stop. I don't know if this is I don't know what else is coming next. So I'm going to stop you here.
Please.
So an animal feeding operation, one where it's devoid of, for 45 days, they're not anywhere where they're maybe on pasture or on some type of forage, right? So be it a lot or a barn or whatnot. In Sonoma County, there has been, we've worked with the Water Quality Board, and you've seen over years how freestall barns for dairy and whatnot have been
You said freestyle?
freestall.
Freestall.
So what it is, it's a barn where there's individual stalls that says the cows can go in, there's food there, they eat there, whatever, and they can go pick a stall and lay down when they want. It's clean bedding, all those kinds of things. But ultimately, we're taking animals off the land in the wintertime so that we can collect any effluent and make sure that we are not polluting the water through water runoff and those types of things. So to do that, we take our animals and put them in clean, dry bedding with all the food they want, clean water. And it happens for more than 45 days in Sonoma County because when it starts to rain, even the water board says we need to collect, be in these barns. And everybody knows that the Sonoma County rains more than 45 days in a year.
Yeah.
So immediately out the gate, just for being a good steward for your animals and your land, you're an animal feeding operation.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
And
that
again,
so deceitful.
The terminology is just has a negative kind of bent to it.
Sure.
You call it animal feeding operation, not good steward of the land.
Why would you call it that?
Yeah.
Control the language.
Those themselves won't be impacted by this ballot measure. But this definition is important because being an AFO is a prerequisite for being a CAFO. So when does an AFO become a CAFO? When it confines a large number of animals or directly pollutes surface water with animal waste. Fortunately, in Sonoma County, no facilities are permitted to discharge waste directly into surface water.
Correct.
That means the only facilities that qualify as CAFOs in Sonoma County are those that meet the federal definition of a large CAFO.
So stop.
By confining a...
Okay, that just proved my point earlier. She herself said there's no farms here in Sonoma County that are discharging manure or anything into the waterways.
Right.
So she herself is confirming that they are looking at a number of animals on a farm and you can't be that size. That's it. That's all this does.
That's all it is. It's just a number.
Just a number. That's
so
it.
They're coming into town and saying, we don't want any more of, because there are farms that are that size in
absolutely.
Sonoma County.
Doesn't mean they're bad.
No.
Doesn't mean they're polluting. Very much could mean that they have the utmost, greatest animal welfare practices possible.
And a lot of them have probably been in business for
generations.
Years. Yeah.
Generations. Family farms. Family farms in Sonoma County. All based on a number.
She just said it.
Yep.
Large number of animals. For example, a facility that confines over 125,000 chickens being raised for meat, or a dairy facility that confines over 700 mature dairy cows. Sonoma County is well known for its hundreds of small family farms, but throughout the county, there are more than a dozen large CAFOs that together confine approximately 3 million animals.
So stop for a second.
This includes a Sunrise Farm.
So a couple of things. I also want to clarify that within this definition, it says that if there are two adjoining properties that are owned by the same person, they are now combined to be one. So now you have two farms. So from a dairy perspective, you have two dairy farms next to each other.
Right.
And so they share a fence.
That each has 400 cows.
Or
You put them together, now it becomes 800.
Now because they share a fence line. Now they are one farm. So there are a couple who meet that definition in Sonoma County.
That's underhanded.
His factory farm in Petaluma with over 500,000 chickens.
So I'm not exactly sure how many chickens are there, but who cares if it meets the Prop 12 rules? Who cares if they're properly cared for? Who cares if there's 500,000? If they have all the right infrastructure there, that's to take care of these birds.
Right.
Who cares if there's 500,000 birds?
Right. That's a great point. There could be, just the number itself. Now, if you said there was 500,000 chickens in a space the size of, Matt's house here, maybe that would be something to look at. But she's talking about, no, just this one facility.
Yeah, that's horrible. It has 500,000. Yeah, and they also have a ton of barns there that meets the rules of Prop 12, which the Californians passed here, that dictates how much room there has to be for these animals. So they actually are probably exceeding what that requirement is. So there's actually more room than what the state of California, the voters in the California have voted in.
Right.
Also on this facility.
Which is pretty strict, from my understanding, too, because California voters voted to change the size of the cages in California, which totally screwed over chicken farmers, because especially the small farms had to get rid of all of their cages that were 2 inches too small. Yeah. All of the business went to states where they didn't have those rules. Totally just undermined the industry in California. But we are doing it now, right? Everyone's following those rules.
Yes.
It's better than anywhere else in the country, pretty
Without
much.
question. So to just look at one farm and say there's 500,000 birds here, what does that matter? If the infrastructure's there and they're meeting all the rules, that is actually a farm that is third-party certified for animal welfare by 3 or 4 different agencies and programs.
Notice the picture, the image that they use does not show poor living conditions for these birds. It just shows the outside of the building.
Right. The other
As if that's supposed to convince anyone.
I could have a car collection in there. I don't know.
Well, you could.
Huge one.
And if this is their facility, the other thing too is that they are collecting the manure and they're pelletizing the manure for compost to be able to sell to wineries and vegetable growers and all other types of ag industries to grow food or wine grapes so that they can fertilize their ground. So it's a very sustainable operation, but they're just simply saying they're trying to scare people. 500,000 birds. Well, if they have room to house properly 500,000 birds and they're sustainably taking care of the manure and turning it into something that's valuable to actually grow other foods or other products.
Right. No,
Who cares if it's 500,000 birds?
In fact, you'd want them to have more, right? Make it 1 million. If they're
that good at what they do?
Exactly.
Yeah.
There you go.
Right?
For 500,000 chickens, Martin's Dairy in Sonoma, with nearly 900 cows confined in a feces-covered feedlot, Reichert Duck Farm in Petaluma with 200,000 ducks living on wire floors, and a number of chicken CAFOs that supply to Purdue, one of the largest meat producers in the country. Some of these CAFOs have been exposed for violating California animal cruelty laws, polluting local waterways.
Do you know anything about that? She said that some of these CAFOs have been reported for animal cruelty or something.
So those have been exposed for violating California animal cruelty laws.
That's actually one that we're looking into right now because it has not been brought to anybody's attention.
That claim.
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
So if it
libel.
If it has happened, it was kept under wraps by the rancher, which is fine. It doesn't need to be out for everyone.
No, it's not everyone's business. Yeah,
but we're uncertain of that claim. So
would you have grounds for a lawsuit,
slander or something?
Slander, yeah,
perhaps.
Yeah, interesting.
Polluting local waterways with toxic waste and spreading pathogens that are making people sick. The ballot.
I wonder what she means by that because. Spreading pathogens that are making people sick. If she's talking about bird flu, that hasn't made people sick. And we talked about bird flu on this show once. I think the whole bird flu scare is just another tactic to try to kill small farms because, for a number of reasons that we don't necessarily have to get into. And I don't know if you have much of an opinion on that, but I think that the whole bird flu thing is just a big scare tactic.
Yeah.
It has taken off like in Texas and other areas, and it's now in dairy cattle.
Right.
So maybe to your point.
A few.
But a few, yeah. So and everybody's watching it closely, obviously, and there have been a couple of farm workers who have, doctors have said, oh, you have that strain, so it went to human,
but
that
not
kind of thing.
Sick.
But
did they die?
No, they're not even sick.
No. Right.
So, okay, maybe she's correct that it is spreading to humans, but it's like totally.
Well, it's not
harmless.
here. It's like if it happens, it's like a whim, right? It's not like it's a rampant issue. But the other thing here is that here in Sonoma County, when we had the avian flu epidemic here, it has been said from government agencies that it is plausible that it was brought on by the trespassing of these animal rights activists because of where they went into one place and then the incubation period and when it showed up and everything, there's nothing not linking them to that.
Interesting.
There's some dirty stuff.
Yeah. Man, I hate these people.
Measure to prohibit CAFOs aims to address these bad actors that are disproportionately impacting our community. The measure would require that...
What is she talking about?
Disproportionately affecting our community.
Yeah.
We just talked about how there are strict regulations. She herself said nobody is polluting. If anything, our farms here are a major contributor to our communities for several reasons: economic, open space. I mean, the list can go on, right? We employ people.
Food.
We produce food. What a novel idea, right? We produce
I
food.
thought the grocery store produced that.
I know. Yeah.
Food.
So,
Well, that term disproportionately is such a squirrely term because it's a statistical
yeah.
term. It's not based on data. It's based on your analysis of the data, and you can take that. You could make up just about anything to show that something is disproportional. Based on what? There's so many factors that go into that. So it's just
lies, and damn statistics.
Exactly.
Existing CAFOs either cease their operations or downsize to below the federal limit for a large CAFO over a 3-year period.
So you can
it would
stop there,
also
too.
prohibit.
So they are saying that, well, we're not saying these farms have to close. They just have to come in within the US EPA definition, which ultimately is saying within these numbers, the farms have to come into these numbers. There are reasons why these farms have gotten to the size they've gotten, because that's what it takes for them to stay in business in Sonoma County with
Right.
what they have. We've seen a ton of dairies and other poultry operations go out of business because they didn't have the means or the ability to grow or the acreage or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
But the farms that are the size they are now is for sustainability.
Sure.
So if we tell them you have to go down to this number, do they not think that that's going to close a farm? That's going to close the farm.
I think they know that.
And I believe that is the goal.
But they're saying, my point is they're going out and saying,
Yeah.
we're not saying they have to close.
Right.
And nobody thinks beyond just that statement. Right. So, and then so to take, and maybe it's going to come up here, maybe I'm jumping the gun, but to take it to the next level, they also concentrate on the large CAFO, not medium. We're not looking at the medium ones based on the definition. But also within what they also added was that any interested party could work on enforcing this rule, which is left up to interpretation.
Huh.
So if they decide that they want to take a medium CAFO after this comes in and go after it, there's nothing stopping them. That's one thing. That's probably the more, I'm not even going to say it's far reaching, but the other main component, the real component, is the economic part, where all of a sudden we start to lose economies of scale. So if we take these farms that are larger than others in Sonoma County, but actually are so small in comparison to industry standard,
Sure.
and those go away, all the resources that they help keep, that they call on now and they pay for, has been helping to keep the costs lower. So now all of a sudden they go away, we're going to lose veterinarians, we're going to lose other ancillary businesses, and then these feed mills that are still here, they're going to have to increase their costs, because now if we have to get it to everybody, it's not going to stay the same price, right? It's just basic economics. Yep. So when they say, oh, we're not going after the small ones, okay, maybe you're saying that, but it's going to trickle down to other farms of all sizes and other ancillary businesses that are all family owned.
That is such a great point. I'm glad you made that clear. Also, what you said, that these farms in Sonoma County are small relative to the industry standard.
So small.
People just need to be connected to these farms to understand, exactly what you were just saying. Also, how hard it is, the uphill struggle that it is to make money as a farmer, and to add anything that makes that harder is just going to destroy these industries.
Right. And, the one piece of the teaching and the connecting with the consumer that most don't realize is that farmers are price takers. So with every regulation and every additional cost that we have to bear, be it, equipment or fees for a permit, all of that has to be paid. And we can't turn around and say, okay, well, now today our milk is going to be this because we had it. No. We are told this is what the market is right now. This is what you're going to get paid. That's it. So that's why there's also that struggle, and there's a disconnect, because a lot of times people walk into a store and go, oh my gosh, are you kidding me that eggs are X or milk is this?
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna say that from the farm to the store there aren't expenses. Of course there's expenses there, right? But my point is that within the market, others get to increase their costs to make sure they've covered it. Farmers have to work within the means of what they're dictated.
Man, it is such a heavily regulated industry.
That middleman stuff kills everything. I buy barley at 25 to 30% more than the elevator is going to buy it for, which is how I convince guys to work with me or to take chances on me. And so we just eliminated so if you grow grain, you go to the elevator says this is what we're paying, you got to take it. Mm-hmm. I came in and said, grow this for me, I'll give you 20, 25% more than what the elevator's giving you, whatever it was. or whatever it is. It's more. And it seems like if we could get the butchers to go directly to the farmers,
there's so much regulation in food that shouldn't be there. Like that middleman is almost like required by law. Like,
well, it makes things more efficient. And then if you're a farmer, if you know what your grain prices are going to be a year out, let's say, and I might be wrong on some of the details of this, but it allows them to plan to go, okay, this is what they're paying next year. This is what I should grow. This is how much I should plant, and this is how I can be efficient with it. Don't overplant, don't underplant. And so it gives them some confidence in what's happening. So I'm not going to say that they're worthless. That there is a room for them, but it does seem if we could get more butchers or more bakers or more whatever, just going directly to these guys, buying the grain directly and milling it, and eliminating that middleman. First of all, it gives you a lot more control. That's what we do over the varieties that you get. So you could offer different varieties because they could grow it on a smaller scale. You're going to give them a little bit more money. Yeah, your bread's going to be $8 a loaf, but it's going to be way healthier than the Wonder Bread that you're going to buy at the store. So it just seems everything has been bottlenecked into these middlemen, and that's where we get into a lot of trouble with this.
And there's just so much regulation everywhere along the way. The up in Humboldt, the Redwood Meat Company just went out of business, and they just couldn't keep up with. It wasn't just regulation, PG&E, and they had kind of an older facility, I guess, but they've been, they just get hammered. All of their facilities have to be so carefully monitored, all the labeling that they're required to do, all of the testing. There used to be a thing called, I think it's called field butchering, where you could send a butcher out to the field, butcher it, boom, send it back to the freezer. That's illegal now. Right. The thing with buying raw milk, how that's so heavily regulated. It's all of that, these just regulation on top of regulation that's makes farming just so treacherous and so difficult. And I can't help but think that that's intentional.
Well, finish this and we'll get to that.
New CAFOs from entering Sonoma County. While the terms and definitions can sound
great. So, and it's going to prevent,
and another thing,
it's going to prevent new farms from coming into the county.
That's right. At least at that
as
size,
well, right? At that size, yeah. But like you said, you need an economy of scale to survive.
And I can tell you, if these farms go out, nobody's coming in to take them over.
Oh, right. Well, like you said, the veterinarians are gone, and the feed stores are gone, and all the the infrastructure that was here. Once it's gone. Good luck building that back up again. And
just one, I think, a statistics that's really important to let people understand it within Sonoma County, and that this was through the report that was commissioned by the Board of Supervisors, it was found that for every job lost on a livestock, like a dairy or poultry operation, an additional job will be lost in the Sonoma County economy.
I believe that.
How do you see it?
The irony, too, that people are probably still going to eat these food products, but instead of it coming from here, it's going to be coming from, the Arizona or some inland, area where they just have this gigantic, horrible system that is actually bad for the environment, actually bad for the animals. And so you're going to be eating that instead?
I think I just saw apples bought from Brazil or something.
Right.
And it was okay, how is that better than getting them from Sebastopol?
Complicated? The simple truth is factory farming hurts all of us. The American Public Health Association.
Stop for a second. I'm sorry, it's every little, I know. I can break down every little.
I was hoping for that.
This is really, really good.
Factory farms hurts all of us.
Back to work, Jake.
Okay. What is a factory farm?
Definition.
Yeah.
It's super subjective.
Yeah.
Right?
Do you have a definition that
so I will tell you,
you just avoid the term at all?
Well, I don't care for the term because it's still subjective, right? So I actually put this on a Facebook post. Somebody wrote something and I said, well, there is no quantifiable definition of a factory farm. And this person wrote back and said, oh, yes, a factory farm is, and I'm just going to paraphrase, ones where animals can't move around and they're forced to all these different forceful things, whatever, which is still if you don't believe in it, you're not going to think anything anybody does is good or right.
Sure.
Right. But at the bottom, it said, you're not a factory farm if you are sustainable and you do all these practices and you do pasture. And I was like, That's what we do in Sonoma County.
Yeah, have you driven by a farm in Sonoma County?
So now I'm confused. But ultimately, my point is that if you don't believe in animal agriculture of any kind, 5 cows is a factory farm. Right. I respect and understand animal husbandry. So I actually was at a dairy in Southern California. It milked 15,000 cows. And I was like,
wow.
When I went to drive in, I was like, oh, what is this? It was beautiful.
Really?
And amazing.
That's good to hear.
So they had 2 rotary milking parlors right next to each other, 100 cows each. And I have to tell you, when cows get into like a rotary milking, but like they want to get on.
Sure.
It's social for them because they're looking at each other as
Right.
they
They
go
get to
around
eat the grain or whatever.
And they get out and they get to go get fresh food. And and I was watching these cows. It was a Jersey dairy. And I'm watching these cows and they were as calm as could be. Their body condition was beautiful. The employees were walking among them. They weren't skittish. They were so that means that they're well handled. They trust them. But 15,000 cows. Like for me, like maybe, oh man, it would take a lot for me to call that a factory farm. But do you see where I'm going with that?
Totally.
Like, it's subjective.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
It could be a million as long as they're well taken care of. By the way.
Yeah.
Speaking of driving out through the fields and out to West County, it's shocking how many people in Sonoma County don't ever go out there. Number 2, my wife and I joke all the time, especially if you go into like Tamales area. Those cows are like overlooking the ocean.
Oh my God,
they're
I know.
chilling.
That's so good.
They have such a better life than most people. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Right.
So I think that was the end of the ad.
Thank God.
I don't know if that is the person that I spoke to, but when I first contacted you, I wanted to host a debate.
Right.
Because we do a Liberty Tree debate series. And it's telling that you were instantly on board. You were like, yes, let's do this. I want to have this out in a public forum. And that the Yes on Jay people just wouldn't commit. They had all sorts of excuses. They couldn't, it wasn't a big enough venue for them, or they were too busy or whatever.
They couldn't control it.
Exactly. And that's what's going on. Like the truth is so much easier to tell than a lie. And if you have to get up in front of people for an hour and a half and have someone challenging you on what you're saying, the truth is going to come out. There's just no way to lie that well for that long. You could have a team of people on computers feeding you information to help you with your lies. It's still going to come out. And I think that's really telling that that they knew that this is not their form. There's no way they could handle debating you on something like this.
Marketplace of ideas. They don't participate.
Yeah.
They just won't. Yeah.
I hope that obviously the Measure J fails. And from what I can tell, it looks like it's going to. I haven't ran into a single person that thought it was a good idea. And people that might identify completely differently than I do politically, still think that Measure J is a bad idea.
Yeah, and I mean it's really telling when we can say that both the Democrat and Republican parties of Sonoma County both vehemently say no on Measure J. Yeah. This is about food. This is about our community. Yeah. This is about all of our lives as Sonoma County residents changing because the whole pulse of Sonoma County would change and go away, if you ask me. And I think to your point, this is a bipartisan issue. This is, people do not want this. They recognize that this is not good.
What needs to happen, in my opinion, is not only that it fails, but it fails so miserably that it's just no one ever tries it again. I mean, it needs to just be completely buried because it's one of the worst ideas
It's a horrible idea.
Yeah. Dayna, thank you so much for coming on the show. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on before we go?
No, I think we more or less covered it. I mean, I talk about this almost 24/7, so I could keep going, but no, I'm I'm good. I encourage everyone to vote no. This really is not good for Sonoma County. It's not what they portray it to be. And again, I think it's always important to recognize that the end goal of these types of groups is that we don't have animal protein, and ultimately it comes down to somebody else is going to dictate what's on your plate or in your glass. And you should be able to always have the choice.
Just country boys and girls getting down on the farm. Ain't no dress code, just some rules that you need to know. Don't mess with the bull, he can get real mean. Don't forget to shut the gate, stay out of the beans. If it starts to raining, we'll just head to the barn. We're country boys and girls getting down on the farm.